Ted Bundy, one of the most infamous serial killers in American history, was a man whose charm and intelligence masked a deep-seated darkness. His name is synonymous with terror and brutality, his crimes spanning the 1970s and leaving a trail of devastation across several states. Born Theodore Robert Cowell on November 24, 1946, Bundy's life story is a chilling narrative of a man who was able to deceive not only his victims, but also those closest to him, including his family, friends, and even law enforcement officials. Bundy's ability to appear normal, intelligent, handsome, and charismatic enabled him to commit horrific acts while evading suspicion. He lured his victims, most of whom were young women, with his charm and good looks, often pretending to be injured or in need of help to gain their trust. Once he had them in his clutches, Bundy's true nature emerged, revealing a predator who derived pleasure from exerting power over the vulnerable. His crimes shocked the nation not only because of their brutality, but also because Bundy defied the typical profile of a serial killer. He was educated, well-spoken, and even studied law, using his knowledge to manipulate the legal system during his trials. From his troubled early life to his gruesome crime spree, and ultimately to his capture and execution, Bundy's story serves as a grim reminder of the capacity for evil that can lurk beneath a seemingly normal exterior. Ted Bundy's early life was marked by secrecy, confusion, and a lack of stable identity. Born Theodore Robert Cowell in Burlington, Vermont, Bundy's early years were shrouded in mystery, beginning with the uncertainty surrounding his parentage. His mother, Eleanor Louise Cowell, was an unwed 22-year-old woman when she gave birth to him. To avoid the stigma of being an unwed mother, Eleanor initially passed off her son as her younger brother, while her parents, Samuel and Eleanor Cowell, raised Bundy as their own child. Bundy's early years in Philadelphia were marked by a complex and emotionally distant family environment. His grandfather, Samuel Cowell, was known to be an abusive and volatile man, prone to violent outbursts. Some reports suggest that Samuel had a significant impact on Bundy's development, instilling in him a sense of instability and confusion from an early age. In 1950, when Bundy was 4 years old, his mother moved to Tacoma, Washington, taking Bundy with her and changing his surname to Nelson. Shortly after, she married Johnny Culpeper Bundy, a hospital cook, and Ted took his stepfather's surname, becoming Ted Bundy. Johnny Bundy attempted to establish a normal family life, but Ted remained emotionally distant from him, never accepting him as a father figure. Bundy's childhood in Tacoma was seemingly typical on the surface, but there were early signs of the darkness that would later consume him. He was described as a shy, introverted boy, often struggling with social interactions and preferring to keep to himself. Despite his quiet demeanor, Bundy exhibited troubling behaviors even as a child, including an unusual fascination with knives and a tendency to engage in petty theft. Academically, Bundy was bright but unremarkable. He showed an early interest in politics and law, foreshadowing his later attempts to study law and enter politics. However, beneath the surface, Bundy was grappling with deep-seated insecurities and a growing sense of alienation. His early experiences of confusion about his identity, coupled with the emotional instability of his home life, laid the groundwork for the darker aspects of his personality to develop. Bundy's early life was a complex tapestry of contradictions. On one hand, he was a bright, seemingly normal child with potential, but on the other, he was a boy growing up in a dysfunctional family environment, struggling with feelings of inadequacy and confusion. These early experiences would play a critical role in shaping the man he would become, a man capable of unimaginable cruelty and deception. Despite these challenges, Bundy managed to maintain a facade of normalcy, excelling academically and participating in school activities. Bundy attended Woodrow Wilson High School in Tacoma, Washington, where he was known as a shy but intelligent student. He was involved in the Boy Scouts and was an active member of the Methodist Church, further contributing to the image of a well-behaved, if somewhat reserved, young man. However, Bundy's outward behavior belied the turmoil that was brewing beneath the surface. It was during these years that Bundy's fascination with violence and control began to take shape. He developed an interest in voyeurism, often peeping into the windows of unsuspecting women in his neighborhood. This behavior, though not yet violent, indicated a growing obsession with exerting power over others, particularly women. Bundy also began engaging in petty theft, stealing items such as ski equipment and even forging lift tickets. These early criminal activities, while relatively minor, foreshadowed the more serious crimes he would commit later in life. After graduating from high school in 1965, he enrolled at the University of Puget Sound before transferring to the University of Washington in 1966, where he studied Chinese. During his time at the University of Washington, Bundy began dating Stephanie Brooks, a relationship that would have a profound impact on him. Stephanie was an attractive, affluent young woman who represented everything Bundy desired but felt he could never truly attain. Their relationship was intense, but ultimately ended when Stephanie broke up with Bundy, citing his lack of ambition and direction as reasons for the split. The breakup with Stephanie was a turning point for Bundy. It triggered a deep sense of rejection and inadequacy, feelings that would fuel his later violent behavior. Bundy's inability to process his emotions in a healthy way led him to channel his rage and frustration into acts of violence and control. This period of his life marked the beginning of his descent into the dark and twisted world of serial murder. The transition from Ted Bundy's troubled adolescence to his emergence as a violent predator was gradual but inevitable. The seeds of his violent tendencies were sown in his teenage years, but it was during his early adulthood that these tendencies began to manifest in increasingly dangerous ways. By the time Bundy reached his early 20s, he had developed a pattern of behavior that would eventually lead to one of the most horrific crime sprees in American history. Bundy's first known violent attack occurred in 1969 when he attempted to abduct and assault a woman in Seattle. Although this attempt was unsuccessful, it marked the beginning of a series of increasingly violent acts. Bundy's method of operation during this period involved luring his victims by feigning injury or pretending to be an authority figure, such as a police officer or firefighter. Once he had gained their trust, he would overpower them, often using a blunt object to knock them unconscious before abducting them. One of Bundy's early victims was Karen Sparks, an 18-year-old University of Washington student. In January 1974, Bundy broke into her apartment, bludgeoned her with a metal rod, and sexually assaulted her. Although Sparks survived the attack, she was left with permanent physical and mental damage. This attack marked the beginning of a series of brutal assaults and murders that would escalate in frequency and violence. As Bundy's violent behavior escalated, so did his ability to evade capture. He became increasingly confident in his ability to manipulate and deceive those around him, using his charm and intelligence to create a facade of normalcy. Bundy's victims were typically young, attractive women, often college students, who resembled his ex-girlfriend, Stephanie Brooks. This fixation on women who reminded him of Stephanie suggests that Bundy's violence was, in part, driven by a desire to exert control and power over those who represented his perceived failures and inadequacies. Ted Bundy's crime spree, spanning from 1974 to 1978, remains one of the most horrifying chapters in American criminal history. Over these years, Bundy committed a series of murders across multiple states, demonstrating a chilling combination of cunning, brutality, and an ability to evade capture that left law enforcement baffled and communities terrorized. Bundy's criminal activities began in earnest in January 1974 when he abducted and killed his first known victim, Linda Ann Healy, a 21-year-old University of Washington student. This marked the beginning of a pattern that would repeat itself many times over the next few years. Throughout 1974, Bundy's attacks continued, with several young women disappearing from college campuses across Washington and Oregon. The disappearances followed a similar pattern. Attractive young women, often with long hair parted in the middle, would vanish without a trace. The panic and fear in these communities grew as the number of missing women increased, but police were unable to find any solid leads. Bundy's ability to cross state lines helped him avoid detection. He moved his activities to Utah in the fall of 1974, where he continued his killing spree. In October, he abducted and murdered Melissa Smith, the 17-year-old daughter of a local police chief, followed closely by the abduction of Laura Aang, another 17-year-old girl. These murders shocked the local community, but Bundy remained a ghost, leaving no evidence that could link him to the crimes. In 1975, Bundy's spree extended to Colorado and Idaho. On January 12, 1975, Karen Campbell, a 23-year-old nurse, disappeared from a hotel in Aspen, Colorado, while on vacation with her fiancé. Her body was discovered a month later in a snowbank near the hotel. Bundy continued to strike, abducting and killing young women with chilling regularity. Despite the mounting number of victims, Bundy remained elusive, his ability to blend in and move between states frustrating law enforcement efforts. Bundy's downfall began in August 1975 when he was pulled over by police in Salt Lake City for a traffic violation. Inside his car, officers found suspicious items, including handcuffs, a ski mask, a crowbar, and other tools that could be used for abduction. Although he was initially arrested for possession of burglary tools, this arrest marked the beginning of the end for Bundy. His car was linked to the disappearance of Carol DaRonch, a young woman who had narrowly escaped Bundy's clutches in November 1974. DaRonch identified Bundy in a police lineup, leading to his conviction for aggravated kidnapping and sentencing to prison. However, Bundy's story didn't end with his arrest. While awaiting trial for murder in Colorado in June 1977, Bundy managed to escape from custody not once, but twice. The first escape occurred when Bundy jumped out of a second-story courthouse window in Aspen. He was recaptured after 8 days on the run. The second escape, more brazen and successful, took place in December 1977 when Bundy climbed through a hole in the ceiling of his jail cell in Glenwood Springs, Colorado, and made his way to Florida. Bundy's time in Florida marked the final chapter of his crime spree. In January 1978, just weeks after his escape, Bundy attacked the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University, brutally assaulting 4 women and killing 2, Margaret Bauman and Lisa Levy. His attacks were savage, marked by an intensity that suggested Bundy was spiraling out of control. Less than a month later, Bundy abducted and killed 12-year-old Kimberly Leach, his final known victim. Bundy's reckless behavior in Florida led to his eventual capture. On February 15, 1978, he was stopped by police in Pensacola while driving a stolen vehicle. The officer apprehended him did not realize he had just captured one of the FBI's most wanted fugitives. Bundy initially gave a false name, but his true identity was quickly discovered, and he was finally brought to justice. Ted Bundy's legal proceedings were some of the most highly publicized and complex in American history. After his final capture in Florida, Bundy faced multiple charges, including first-degree murder for the Chi Omega sorority house attacks and the abduction and murder of Kimberly Leach. Bundy's trial for the Chi Omega murders began in Miami on June 25, 1979. The case was notable not only for the gruesome nature of the crimes, but also for Bundy's decision to represent himself in court. Despite having no formal legal training, Bundy's narcissism and desire for control led him to dismiss his legal counsel. This decision allowed him to cross-examine witnesses, including those who had seen him on the night of the murders, further showcasing his manipulative tendencies. The prosecution presented a strong case against Bundy, including eyewitness testimony, forensic evidence linking him to the crime scenes, and bite mark analysis that matched Bundy's dental impressions to wounds found on Lisa Levy's body. Despite Bundy's attempts to undermine the prosecution's case, the evidence was overwhelming. On July 24, 1979, Bundy was found guilty of the Chi Omega murders and sentenced to death by electrocution. He received another death sentence in 1980 for the murder of Kimberly Leach. Throughout the legal proceedings, Bundy continued to assert his innocence, even as he faced mounting evidence and the reality of his impending execution. Bundy's legal battles didn't end with his convictions. Over the next decade, he filed numerous appeals, arguing procedural errors and violations of his rights. However, all of his appeals were eventually denied. In the weeks leading up to his execution, Bundy made several last-ditch efforts to avoid the electric chair. He began to confess to more murders, offering details about the locations of victims' remains in exchange for a stay of execution. This strategy, which Bundy had hoped would buy him more time, ultimately failed. Ted Bundy was executed in the electric chair at Florida State Prison on January 24, 1989, at 7:16 a.m. The event attracted significant media attention, with hundreds of people gathered outside the prison, some celebrating the execution with signs and cheers. Bundy's final moments were reported to be calm, and he offered no final words.